700 men, 2 clips of ammunition each, no water, no food, no radio, and 30,000 Germans at the bottom of the hill. That's the math on day 5. You're flat on a granite ledge, August heat baking the rock beneath you. Every 4 minutes, the ground convulses. Not a tremor, a detonation. And the shrapnel hums past so close, you feel it pull at your sleeve. Below you in the valley, engines. Not trucks, Panzers. You can hear the tracks grinding on cobblestone. You know what that sound means. You know they're coming up. You check your canteen, dry, you check the radio, static. You check the man next to you. He's not moving anymore. Most men would surrender. Most men would look at the math, look at the tanks, and put their hands up. That would be the rational thing to do. The sane thing. But the men on Hill 314 weren't sane anymore. They were angry. They call it the Lost Battalion. But lost implies they didn't know where they were. They knew exactly where they were. So did the Germans. That was the problem. This is the story of the 700 Americans who stopped Hitler's last gamble in France. Not by attacking, not by retreating, but by refusing to die on a hill nobody back home would ever hear about. And here's what usually gets skipped. This battle didn't just blunt a counterattack. It created the trap that would destroy 2 German armies. The men on Hill 314 didn't know it. They couldn't have known it. They were too busy trying to survive until morning. But the decisions made on that hill, and foxholes dug into rock, say with German tanks grinding up the slopes below, those decisions changed the shape of the war. We're going to walk through exactly how. By August 1944, Operation Cobra had blown the German front wide open, and Patton's Third Army was racing across France. It looked like the war might be over by Christmas. It wasn't. Hitler looked at the American breakout and didn't see a disaster. He saw an opportunity. Every bullet, every gallon of fuel, every truck heading to Patton's army squeezed through one town. Avranches. One road, one throat. Hitler looked at that throat and decided to cut it. Operation Luttich. 4 Panzer divisions, 300 tanks. A 30-kilometer and about 19-mile sprint to the coast slammed the doors shut on the entire American advance. Von Kluge told him the divisions were understrength, that the Luftwaffe couldn't cover them, and the fuel was almost gone. Hitler told him to attack. The attack was set for the night of August 6th. Here's what nobody mentions. The Americans knew it was coming. Ultra, the British code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park, had cracked the German transmissions. Bradley had the attack plan on his desk before the first Panzer engine turned over. But knowing an attack is coming and stopping it are different things. The 30th Infantry Division, Old Hickory, was holding the Mortain sector. National Guard boys from Tennessee and the Carolinas, not paratroopers, not rangers. Citizen soldiers who had just arrived to relieve the 1st Infantry Division hours earlier. And on Hill 314, a rocky height that overlooked every road in the valley, sat their 2nd Battalion, about 700 men. If you've seen our Bastogne episode, same equation, surrounded, outgunned, told to hold. Except at Bastogne, they held a town. At Mortain, they held a pair of eyes. The German attack rolled forward at 0001 hours, on August 7th. 2 SS Panzer divisions led the assault, Das Reich and Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, with the 2nd and the 116th Panzer divisions following. The initial push came wrapped in fog, the kind of thick Norman mist that grounds aircraft and turns tank battles into knife fights. By dawn, the Germans had punched through the American lines at multiple points. Mortain itself fell quickly. German armor was in the streets by 0300 hours, and scattered American units were falling back in confusion. But Hill 314 didn't fall. In the 2nd Battalion, roughly 700 men under Lieutenant Robert Weiss and Captain Reynold Eriksson held the high ground. And that high ground mattered. From the crest of Hill 314, American forward observers could see the entire valley below. Every road, every intersection, every column of German armor moving west toward Avranches. The Germans knew it too. Dog Company. This is Observation Post 2. Enemy armor column bearing 270. Range approximately 1,500 meters, about 1,640 yards. Count 18, maybe 20 vehicles. Request fire mission over. The artillery coordinates went out. Minutes later, shells from the 231st Field Artillery Battalion were falling on the German column. The road below turned into a slaughterhouse. Trucks burned. Tanks threw tracks. The German advance stalled. They called in fire missions all morning, then all afternoon. Lieutenant Weiss was calling down missions within 50 yards, roughly 45 meters, of his own position. "Drop at 50, he radioed. "That's too close, Lieutenant." "Drop at 50 or there won't be anyone left to talk to." The shells screamed in. They shattered German infantry attacks right as they crested the ridge. The 231st Field Artillery Battalion fired 3,420 rounds in the first 24 hours, almost all of it directed from Hill 314. The men up there weren't just fighting a battle. They were conducting one. The fog began to lift around noon, and when it did, the P-47 Thunderbolts arrived. Hitler had launched his counterattack assuming the Luftwaffe would provide air cover. The Luftwaffe had promised 300 fighters, and what actually showed up over Mortain was closer to 75, and the American and British fighter bombers outnumbered them 5-1. Typhoons and P-47s caught the German columns in the open. The 2nd SS Panzer Division lost over 30 vehicles in a single hour of air attack. The advance toward Avranches stalled less than 10 kilometers, roughly 6 miles, from its start line. But the men on Hill 314 didn't know any of that. What they knew was simpler. The Germans were surrounding them. By nightfall on August 7th, all roads to Hill 314 were cut. The battalion was encircled. The Germans cut the phone lines. They set up machine gun positions on every side. And the Germans, furious that this single hilltop was directing the artillery and airstrikes, shredding their offensive, threw everything they had at taking it. The attacks came in waves. German infantry pushed up the slopes throughout the night. SS Grenadiers, hardened veterans. They charged up the rocky face, supported by mortars and Nebelwerfers, 6-barreled rocket launchers. The sound was a terrifying shriek, followed by 6 rapid explosions that shattered the trees and turned the rock into razor-sharp splinters. The SS troops climbing that slope had been fighting since June. They were tired too, but they had their orders, same as the Americans. The Americans held. They held again on August 9th. The 30th Division tried to break through to them. They failed. Tried again the next morning. Failed again. The Germans had sealed the ring. 700 men, alone. By day 3, the fighting wasn't the worst part. It was the thirst. August in France, the heat baked the stone. There were no wells on Hill 314, no streams. The canteens had been dry for 48 hours. Men were drinking water from truck radiators. Some sucked on pebbles to keep saliva flowing. Some tried to lick the dew off the rocks at dawn. The wounded were piling up in a central aid station, a depression in the rock. A medical officer performed surgeries with shrinking supplies and no anesthesia. Men were tearing up their shirts to bind wounds that needed surgery. Gangrene sets in fast in the heat. The smell began to drift over the perimeter. They tried to get supplies in. C-47s flew over, dropping canisters. But the drop zone was too small. The wind was wrong. Most of the pallets drifted into German lines. The Americans watched, cracked lips, bleeding. Now, as crates of ammunition and water landed 300 meters, about 330 yards, outside the perimeter. In German hands now. One canister landed inside the perimeter. The men crawled to it, dragging it open under fire. It was full of blank forms for morning reports. Paper. They got paper. They did manage to fire artillery shells filled with medical supplies onto the hill. Hollow shells packed with bandages, fired from batteries miles away. Think about that. Shooting medicine out of a cannon into a rock pile. Most of them smashed on impact, but the men crawled out under fire to scrape the crushed morphine ampules out of the dirt. The German commander sent a surrender demand. an SS officer. Clean uniform, shiny boots. He offered honorable treatment, immediate medical care for the wounded. It was a good offer, a rational offer, and Captain Erickson didn't hesitate. He wasn't interested in rational. He reportedly told the officer he wasn't surrendering. When the German pressed him, his men racked the bolts of their rifles. The SS officer went back down the hill. 10 minutes later, the shelling started again. By August 10th, the situation had become desperate in ways the official reports struggle to convey. The after-action report records the ammunition status. Rifle ammunition critical. Mortar rounds exhausted. No grenades remaining in Baker Company sector. The radio batteries were failing. Fire missions became shorter, more urgent. Every transmission might be the last. Baker 6, Dog 3. Enemy infantry massing northeast slope. Estimate 2 companies. Fire mission follows. Make it count. Batteries critical. Then the batteries died. The artillery support, their only shield, was gone. They were stripping ammunition off the dead. The perimeter was so small now that a good mortar crew could drop a round into any foxhole. One transmission from the hill, picked up by division headquarters, captured everything. Enemy inside perimeter in Baker sector. Hand-to-hand in some positions, still holding. Out. Still holding. On August 12th, 6 days after the encirclement began, the noise changed. Not the high-pitched whine of German engines. The deep, throaty roar of Shermans. Elements of the 35th Infantry Division were breaking through, fighting their way up the road, tank by tank, hedgerow by hedgerow. On the hill, men wept. They were too weak to stand, but they pulled themselves up to see the white stars on the green turrets. The Germans launched one last attack. They tried to overrun the aid station. The walking wounded picked up rifles. Men who couldn't walk threw grenades. It held. The relief column found the battalion still in position, still holding ground. Of the approximately 700 men who'd been surrounded, 357 walked off the hill under their own power. That number's real. If these aren't just numbers to you, if you want the version of history that doesn't fit in a textbook, a like and a subscribe tell us you're here. The survivors ate, they slept. And then, a few days later, they marched east again. The German counterattack didn't just fail at Mortain. Its failure created the conditions for one of the war's great disasters. While the Panzer divisions were grinding themselves against Hill 314 and American air power, the rest of Patton's army was sweeping east and north. Now, by the time the Germans finally called off Operation Luttich on August 12th, American and British forces were closing a trap around them, the Falaise Pocket. Between August 12th and 21st, the Wehrmacht lost nearly 50,000 men captured and perhaps 10,000 killed. An entire army group, everything that had defended Normandy, was effectively destroyed. Because Hitler had insisted on this attack, because he kept his panzers at Mortain, trying to take a hill that 700 Americans wouldn't give up. He left them in the noose too long. The trap snapped shut, and it started on a hill they couldn't take. But here's the detail that changes everything. The observation posts on Hill 314, the ones that called in the artillery and airstrikes, weren't just directing fire. No, they were providing the real-time intelligence that convinced Bradley to hold his positions and let the trap close. There was a moment on August 8th when American commanders considered pulling back, abandoning Mortain, shortening the lines. The safe play was withdrawal. The reason they didn't? The men on the hill. The forward observers were still transmitting, still calling in coordinates, still reporting German positions. As long as Hill 314 held, Bradley's staff could see the battle unfolding in real time. They knew the German offensive was bleeding out. The decision to stand, to let the Germans commit deeper into an attack that was already failing, was made possible by 700 men on a hill who didn't know the war was listening. They hadn't just been soldiers defending a position. They'd been a weapon, the most dangerous kind, the kind that watches. Some of you have family who were there, Mortain, the hedgerows, any of it. If that's you, drop it in the comments. The veterans are almost gone. Their stories shouldn't be. The men of the 2nd Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment, didn't know they were stopping Hitler's last offensive in France. They didn't know they were buying time for the Falaise Pocket to close. They didn't know that 80 years later, someone would still be telling this story. They knew they were out of water. They knew the ammunition was almost gone. They knew the Germans were coming again at dawn. And they knew the order: hold everything. Hill 314 is still there today. Quiet now. Farmland, hedgerows, a small memorial that most tourists drive past without stopping. The foxholes have mostly filled in, and the shell craters have softened into gentle depressions in the grass. But somewhere on that hill, in a foxhole that nobody visits, there's a cartridge casing that's been there since August 1944. 80 years, still waiting.